Vamp. On Sunday afternoon, I met up with Aiden and his crew. They had already ordered a bunch of pizzas and beer by the time I got to the tavern. This wasn't the bar I worked at. This was more recreational. It had pool tables, arcade machines, and a dance floor that had a lot of girls dancing on it tonight, with a stage and band built up at the end of it. I was looking around the bar when I heard Aiden. "Hey Gretchen, over here," he hollered while waving. I waved back and headed over to their table. As I walked over to the table, I heard, "You're kidding. A girl is Jimmy's replacement?" from one of the boys at the table. He said it low to the rest of the group so that I wasn't intended to hear it. I gave him points for trying to be polite. He didn't know I could have heard him in the parking lot if I wanted to. "Gretchen, I want to introduce you to everyone. This is Ryan. Next to him is James. That's Matt, John, Ethan, and you know my Pop Roy." James and Matt were tall and well-built. They both had sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. They must be brothers, I thought, because their facial features were so similar. John was short and bulky, and he had shaggy brown hair and a beard. Ethan had a shaved head and big hazel eyes. He was tall but very muscular. I noticed only one man had a wedding band, and that was James. "Do you want anything to drink?" asked Aiden. "A beer sounds great. House tap, whatever they've got." "I'll be right back," he said as he made his way towards the bar. I was left with 6 pairs of eyes staring at me. "So how did you get this job?" asked Ryan. This was the young man who had made the comment about a girl replacement. I mentally took back the points I'd given him for being polite. "Drop it, Ryan. Aiden gave her a test and she passed with flying colors," said Roy, smiling at me. "I think you'll be surprised at what she can do." "He will be," I interjected, staring straight into Ryan's dark brown eyes. "It's nice to meet you." Ryan sat back in his chair and took a sip of his beer, eyeing me over quizzically. I could see his distaste of the situation oozing from his pores. He did not seem to like me. We sat there, eating pizza and drinking until about 8:30 that night. We all settled our tabs and started to go get our coats on. We exited the bar as a group, and Aiden stopped us quickly before we got in our cars. "I want you all here at 6:30 tomorrow morning. We have a lot that needs to get done in the morning, and then we can head out. Have a good night, be safe driving, and I'll see you all on the ship in the morning." With that being said, we all said good night and went our separate ways. Aiden walked me to my Jeep. "I'm sorry for Ryan." "Don't even worry about it," I said with a wave of my hand as I opened my Jeep door and sat down facing him. "Just promise you'll let me know if he's harassing you on the boat," Aiden said as he stepped closer to me. "What'll you do to him? Throw him in the brig?" I teased with a little pirate twang in my voice. Aiden laughed. "Yeah, or maybe make him walk the plank." I laughed as Aiden moved in to give me a kiss. I laid one hand on his chest so I could feel his heart pumping. He was radiating heat through his t-shirt, even in the cold night air. And like before when he'd held my hand, I could feel myself absorbing his heat through my hand. And from where he was touching my face, I could feel the heat slowly moving through my veins and up my arm. It slowly reached my wrist, then my elbow, then my shoulder, and connected with the heat that was moving down my neck. It had a tingling sensation to it. It was like touching one of those round, clear lights with the electricity running through it, and I loved it. Then all of a sudden, Aiden got a shiver and it caused him to break our lip lock. "Whoa. Sorry, I don't know where that came from," he said, laughing. But I was pretty sure I had caused it, and now I was more confused than ever. "You give me chills," he said as he pecked my lips one more time. I laughed and rolled my eyes playfully. If only he knew, I thought. "Well, I'll see you in the morning," I said as I turned to face forward in my seat. "Sweet dreams. You too." I put my Jeep in drive and headed out of the parking lot. Whatever had happened back there had me freaked. The only simple explanation was that I could absorb heat from humans. I had no idea I even had this ability. Vampires don't maintain physical contact with humans for very long. Generally, we try to avoid touching them at all. It's normal for us to feel warmth when we're drinking their blood, but that's because blood is warm, so we feel it entering our system. I've never experienced sucking the heat out of a human, though. Vladimir never mentioned this. Is it possible he doesn't know about it? Is it just me alone that can do this? Some vampires have special qualities. Could this be mine? That's a stupid quality, I thought. Normally our qualities give us an edge, something to help us survive. I'd have to talk to Buddy about this. Maybe he'd let me try to absorb some heat from him, and then I could know what he's feeling on his end. At least he wouldn't think I'm crazy. I figured it was too late to call him. I know how wares like their sleep. So I figured it could wait until I got back from the fishing trip. When I got home, I flew upstairs to my computer and started sifting through the internet looking for anything related to vampires and heat. Nothing. The only thing it told me was that we're supposed to be cold. Duh. I closed my laptop like I was punishing a puppy for peeing on the carpet, and I set it off to the side. I threw myself back against my pillows and stared up at the ceiling. I tried to take my mind off of it. I went over my mental list of everything I had packed for the trip. I needed more blood. I flew off my bed and headed down to my Jeep. An animal would be easier to kill in a small town, I figured, so I drove my Jeep up one of the remote hills and went for a hike. I had remembered to grab my backpack with empty plastic bottles so I could replenish my supply. I wound up finding a big black bear, which I took down effortlessly. One snap of the neck was all it took. He was a mighty good-sized bear, and he ended up filling 24 plastic pop bottles. This would hold me over for a while. There was more than enough to last me on the fishing trip. When I got home, I slipped 10 bottles into my travel cooler and placed ice packs in to keep the blood cold. I had to double-check I hadn't forgotten anything. I hadn't. I was more than prepared. I was so prepared, I showed up to the boat early. Roy and Aiden were on the deck checking knots and ropes. "Hey guys," I said as I hopped from the deck to the boat. "Morning," said Roy. Aiden was heading over towards me. "Hey Gretchen, you're here early," he said, looking down at his watch. "Yeah, I know. I was ready and I thought I could help you guys with some stuff," I said, shrugging. It's not a problem. I'll take you down to your bunk, and then if you want, you can organize the kitchen and storage areas," he said as he started to head inside. We rounded a corner, and Aiden pushed a door open. "This will be your room. It's the smallest room, but you won't have to share with anyone else." Honestly, I would have been fine sharing a room with any of the guys, but I understood why Aiden would think I'd be uncomfortable. "Thanks," I said, and walked in and set my bags on the bed. I wanted to take my travel cooler, filled with my bottles of blood, out of my bag and find a hiding spot for them. However, Aiden was ready to take me to the kitchen. "If you don't remember, the kitchen is over here," he said as we walked down a small hallway. I was a little surprised to see how much food and supplies there were to put away. The entire kitchen was full of bags that were full of dry foods. "The fridge is filled with all the cold stuff," he said, "but it's not organized." "Well, I'll get to work," I said as I walked over to the bags. "Okay, I'll be up on the deck with my pops if you need anything," said Aiden as he started out of the kitchen. "Okie dokie," I said. I emptied all the bags and organized the food on the counter. I was amazed at how much food there was. When I got everything into the cupboards, I worked on the fridge and freezer. I was almost finished when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs and a door opening soon after that. Then I heard the annoyed voice of a man. "Whose shit is in my room?" yelled Ryan. I closed the fridge door and walked down the hall where I found Ryan standing in the room I had set my bags down. Aiden had heard Ryan and had come down the hallway as well. "I gave this room to Gretchen so she wouldn't have to share with a bunch of guys," said Aiden as he folded his arms across his chest. He was giving Ryan the look that said he shouldn't push him. Ryan must have got the hint because instead of arguing with Aiden, Ryan just said, "Well, where the hell should I go then?" "You can sleep in the room with James, Matt, and Ethan. There's an open bunk in there," said Aiden. Ryan grabbed his bag and walked towards the door. Aiden and I moved out of the doorway so Ryan could walk by us. Ryan stopped and looked down at me. I felt slightly uncomfortable and I glanced at Aiden and then back at Ryan. We were both waiting for him to say something, but instead he nudged Aiden out of the way and walked down the hall to his new room. "Is he on medication?" I asked, quietly joking. Aiden laughed and said no, but sometimes I think he should be. "Did you have any problems in the kitchen?" "No, everything is put away. I was just about to start making some food, but I wanted to unpack some of my warmer clothes first," I said as I moved to start walking back to my room. "Sounds good. Once we eat, we'll pull out of harbor," said Aiden. I quickly went back to my room and shut the door quietly. I took out my deluxe travel cooler and looked around the small room. There was a small cubby behind the door. I popped it open and looked around inside. It was perfect. I placed the cooler inside and then placed my duffel bag on top of it. At least it would hide it well for now. I went back to the kitchen and figured I could start cooking, as men were always hungry. I decided to make my scrambled eggs and hash brown bake with hollandaise sauce. I fried up some bacon and sausages and cooked up about 24 pancakes. I remembered reading online that crab fishermen require more fatty foods and high-calorie foods to keep them fuller longer and to give them more energy. I filled up a pitcher of orange juice and went upstairs to get the boys. They all came downstairs and I dished up food onto their plates. I've always loved the silence that occurs when people are shoving their faces full of food. I don't know why, but the sound of forks and knives scraping against the plates, mouths chewing food, it was peaceful. I compare it to the silence that occurs when I'm feeding on a human and all I hear is the sound of the blood being sucked into my mouth and the sound of their heart beating. "This hash brown bake is delicious," said Matt as he shoved another forkful into his mouth. "Everything is delicious. Thank you for cooking," said Roy. Took a load off of my plate. "Thanks," I said. "I don't mind doing it at all." "Well, you shouldn't since it's woman's work," said Ryan. "Can you get me some more juice?" he asked, holding up his glass. Everyone went quiet and silently ate their bacon and eggs, except James. "What's wrong with you?" Ryan just shrugged his shoulders and went back to eating. One by one, the boys finished their breakfast and placed their plates and dishes in the sink. Then we all headed up to the deck of the boat to get ready to leave harbor. As the ship pulled away from the dock, the crew lined up along the bow of the boat. I let the wind whip my hair around. The salty air smelled amazing. It was so clean and fresh. The water was calm, or as calm as it could be for open waters. "Beautiful, isn't it?" asked James as he came and stood beside me. "Yes, it is," I said as I ran my fingers through my wavy hair. "You'll never get used to the sight. It's different every day. The water is always different. There's always different colors in the sky. It's God's artwork," I said, leaning against the railing, and he nodded, joining me in a similar stance. Out and to the left, we saw some sea lions, and I pointed. "Oh, that's a sign of good luck," said James with a smile. "How long have you been married?" I asked, trying to make small talk. "About 5 years. Her name is Allie. You'd like her. She's a sweetie," he said, smiling. "How'd you guys meet?" "We were high school sweethearts," he said, laughing. "That's cute," I said. "So what's up with you and Aiden?" James asked, nudging my shoulder. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, laughing. James looked around. The other guys were scattered around on the deck doing their own thing and having their own conversations. He looked back down at me and said, "I saw you two in the parking lot last night. I can't say I was surprised the way he was looking at you in the bar all night. So I'm just curious as to what is going on with you two. He's one of my best friends." I looked down at my feet and stared at the bright blue rubber boots I had bought. Then I looked back up at James and said, "I have no idea." Then I started laughing, which caused James to laugh. I like him. I like hanging out with him. I had never really had a friend I could talk to about this stuff, and I always thought it would be a girl, so it felt a little awkward sharing these feelings with a guy. But I liked James, and I could tell he was a nice guy. "How did you guys meet?" asked James. "I was working at Hank's, and he came in with Roy late one night. Then he came in the next day and had lunch, and we talked, and yeah." "You guys have sex yet?" he asked, his smile getting wider. I stood with my mouth open, which caused James to laugh even harder. "That's a yes." "No, it's really not. We haven't done anything like that," I said, shaking my head. "Yet," he said with a smirk. I punched him in the arm. "Ouch! You're strong," he said as he rubbed his arm. "Sorry." "No worries," he said as he looked at me curiously. "What are you two up to over here?" asked Matt as he walked over. "Nothing much, just talking." For the next hour or so, James, Matt, and I talked and joked around while Aiden directed the ship into the spot he wanted it to be. We were all surprised when we heard the buzzer and then Aiden's voice booming over the intercom. "All right, let's get to work, people." I looked up into the window above the bow. I could see Aiden sitting up there. He had a sweatshirt on, and his hair was pulled back into a ponytail. When he saw me looking at him, he smiled, and I smiled back. "Come on, Greenhorn, let's see what you can do," said Matt as he patted me on the back and walked beside me. We all got to work, and everything was going smoothly. The boys were impressed with how fast I was working, and all of them but Ryan gave me encouragement and compliments. I knew I wouldn't have had a problem keeping up with the guys. Over the next week, we were lucky enough to not get caught up in any storms or have any accidents at all. Everything was going great, and the thought actually crossed my mind that nothing could go wrong.